So the first one is about the collaboration between US and India's technology ecosystem. So without much ado, I'm going to ask Professor Chaudhuri, who will chair the session, to give his opening comments. And then after that, we will have each of our panelists give their summary for a couple of minutes, and then we'll open it up to a discussion between them, between you, questions from me, questions from the audience, etc. So, Professor Chaudhuri.
Thank you, Rajat. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. And since I'm starting this discussion now, just very briefly, let me tell you the evolution of the IITs to give you a context. So if you look at the first 25, 30 years of IIT system, okay, it's what we call like IIT 1.0, where the undergraduate teaching was one of the main thing. Then, thanks to Naidamma Commission and others later on, we moved to IIT 2.0 when the research came in. And now today, if you see most of these IITs, they're about, I would say 60% of the students are in the grad school. Okay. Then this after around 20 years or 20, 30 years, then we move more towards the IIT 3.0, where actually we're looking at connection with the industry, doing it in the industry-related research. And then that would take us to probably in another few years or so with IIT 4.0, where actually we'll be looking at the impact at the social level, where many of the US universities and others, they're right now at, like, let's say 4.0. Now, with that in mind, now where do we stand collectively in the Indian higher education research ecosystem? I would say there are three aspects if you try to follow what IIT 3.0 to 4.0 transition that is happening. One is that the research is becoming interdisciplinary in nature. That means you need people of diverse background. Then we also need all these research needs high-end tools, whether they are analytical tools or the computing tools. So these are the requirements that we need to have collectively in our system. And the third one, which is very important in finally making it something that counts, is a critical mass developing around people who would be working on it. So I must say that all this thing, we are still not there where we would like to be. And because of that, there is a need that when you don't have it, you borrow it, you collaborate, you take support from others, and also you lend support to others. And if that's what you do, then the iCET was started about a year ago, thanks to Mr. Modi and Biden, that initiative, right here in DC. And then we have been working towards it. And in India, we have an empowered committee that formed with some of us there to see how to actually see that these three aspects are taken care of. Now, why? Because, of course, we need to take care of this. And why US? That is what you may want to say, because you could do it in other places. Because many of us, we have, like as a faculty members, as our students that come here, and they become alumni, we have a fairly good connect with the US educational and research ecosystem. So we should definitely take leverage of that. And of course, something more important in recent time is what is the geopolitical evolution that is happening around us. So keeping that in mind, so both government together started what is called the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, iCET in short. And under that, there has been quite a bit of deliberations between the US counterpart and the Indian counterpart. The US counterpart is being run by AAU, Association of American Universities. I think Tobin can actually talk on that. But at this point, because to set up the conversation, I would say that why are we talking about this in PanIIT? Okay? Because we know that this is the high-end talent pool that over the years IITs and the other Indian education system has created in conjunction with what you have in US. So we want, in that particular case, that to divide this PanIIT, that the support that it can lend to this initiative. One would be, of course, there are many of them in the academia, so we need them, in terms of how they can help to bridge the gap that what sometimes we have. We also have many of you who are in industry, how you can support them to the industrial. And I must tell you that recently US and Japan, they started with about something like this, $150 million, where actually it came from the industry. And some of these industries are headed by the Indians, okay? And then, of course, there are many of you also are in the government agencies, which you can actually help making it happen. So with that in mind, now if I go back to complete my part of the talk, is that if I said that IIT 4.0 would be the impact, now when you see this, all of this maturing together by shaking hands with the US counterparts here under iCET, we can build up this relationship, particularly right now, it's about 5 areas that we have been talking about. Okay, so they are like agriculture, healthcare, sustainability and energy. Then we have semiconductor and advanced computing, which involves AI and machine learning kind of areas. So when all this thing happens, probably we'll be very close to making a much bigger impact that to the common people in India than probably what we are doing it today. So thank you. I'll hand over back to Rajat.
So I think one of the things that we from PanIIT are very interested in is trying to figure out how to help you in this mission. Because I know that some of these initiatives sometimes stall. We want to be a catalyst to make sure that we give the extra energy to it, and many of us are, as you said, connected to it. So now I would invite each of the panelists to take a couple of minutes and give their perspective on this collaboration and how to make it more effective. Professor Rangarajan, please.
Thank you. So here I represent IISc, in some sense a fish out of water in a PanIIT meeting, but still I should point out that the first IIT Kharagpur was founded by our director who went and founded IIT Kharagpur, so we have that old connection. But coming back to this iCET program, I think it's very important because as Subhasis was pointing out, a lot of the earlier connections between US and India have been individual based, because many of us have done either PhDs or postdocs in the US and many of our students are here. So it has been more individual based rather than institutional based. I think iCET provides a venue for doing it on an institutional basis, and it also brings together multiple areas. As was pointed out now, everything is interdisciplinary. So even if you do healthcare, for example, AI is also important. So you need both of these to come together. So if just on the Indian side, if just DBT is funding something, they'll probably concentrate on healthcare. DST may concentrate on AI, whereas this provides a platform to bring together everything so that you have a very interdisciplinary approach to all these critical and emerging technologies. And also another important point which I think should be looked at is for the Indian side, if you see one of the critical gaps that we have is a lack of high-quality postdocs. In the US, many of the labs are run by high-quality postdocs, and that allows them to get into new areas, expand their labs. So that is a big issue in India because most of our good students come to the US, for example, to do their postdocs. So we lose out on that. So it will be good through this platform to also encourage probably postdocs to spend part of the time in the US and part of the time in India, so it becomes a win-win situation for both of them. And one could also leverage equipment, lack of equipment sometimes which you may have on the Indian side. Even on the US side, maybe one equipment we may have which may not be easily available. Given taking advantage of the time difference between the two, where we can work while US is sleeping and US can work while we are sleeping, we can leverage the once you make remote operation of many of these equipment, one can try to leverage the equipment availability across the countries, so that the Indian students and others can use the equipment while it's idle time here, and vice versa. So I think these are some of the points that I would like to make, and yeah. So
thank you. Professor Murty.
Good morning, friends. As far as the iCET is concerned, in India, the government has formed, as Subhasis mentioned, is something called Empowered Committee for Industry and International Collaborations. I'm the co-chair of that from Indian side, and as far as the American side, we have the AAU representing. Our whole team is here basically to have discussions with the AAU. We also have AAU representative today to tell you that yes, is a strong collaboration that is going on. We also had discussions with a number of government bodies, NSF, for example. NSF representative is here, Mohan, Kumar. And we met NIST, DARPA, and quite a number of such agencies to see how do we strengthen. And the basic reason why we are in front of you today is that our PanIIT represents academia, industry, and startup ecosystem. And in all these three, there is a great need to strengthen Indo-US collaborations. We would like to see if we can, our students and US students are jointly supervised by the faculty from both the sides. And this is something which we would like to see more and more happening rather than just Indian students coming and joining for PhD at places in US, but more importantly, can we have joint supervision? Similarly, joint programs where industry from India and academia from India also collaborate with industry and academia in US so that there is whatever outcome that comes out will be actually commercialized in a big way. Third point we are very keen on also is, can we have joint innovations? Okay, the students in India are really doing great job now in terms of innovations. Last decade or so, you would have seen a number of unicorns coming out of India, and there is a possibility that joint innovations can add a significant value, 1 + 1 being significantly greater than 2. And that is another area where we would like to see how we can strengthen that. Last point is skilling. There is a lot of need for skilling. So we see certain areas where the US has strong strengths where possibly India has to take support. For example, semiconductors, if you take, India still does not have big fab facilities. So we would like to see if our students can come, get that skilling needed, and so that they are useful not only for the India, but also for US and the whole globe. So these are certain areas where we would like to strengthen these collaborations, and I'm sure with the support of all of you sitting here, this can happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor.
So I'm a director of IIT Ropar, which is situated in Punjab. And when we talk about Punjab, Punjab is known for the food bowl of India. So we must talk about food security and agriculture. So this is one of the vertical in iCET also, where we are going to work with our US counterparts in area of agri-tech and food processing. Because food security is very important, and how we can use the modern technology. And we talk yesterday, there was many talk about AI, how we can use AI in agri-tech, and we can help our farmers, they can increase the productivity. And the farms in India is not as big as in the US, so we have a small farms, and then how the technology will play a key and very important role. Another part of that we have already touched also, that when we talk about skilling, this skilling should be developed jointly. It's not only that our students come here and they stay here. So we want that all this skilling should be done together. And this is one of the issues where we want to push forward, that we should much more focus on the dual degree programs. So our student from here can go back to India also. So this is one area where mobility is one of the area where we are looking. It should be from both sides and for its own equal partnership. So this is one area we want to work. And of course, how we create this environment of the food security. We have seen that during the pandemic time that how important was the food security. And there we can work together, and this is the area which is going to play a key role in the iCET also. Thank you.
I just want to make here a correction. The name up there is not the right one. We have Professor Satya from IIT Tirupati, who is a member of IISc. So he will be. I think Professor Prakash is coming in the next panel.
Next panel.
So Professor Satya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rajat. Professor Murty and Professor Subhasis had mentioned about this Empowered Committee for International and Industrial Collaboration. And it's got 9 members in this committee. With the IIT Council was initially asked to coordinate this, and representation from the various generations of IITs. You know, the IIT system has been growing. We have 23 IITs now. The first generation IITs, we have 3 of you from the first generation IITs, Professor Subhasis, Professor Rangan Banerjee from IIT Delhi, and then Professor Kamakoti from IIT Madras. And from the second generation IITs, we have Professor Murty and Professor Ahuja, and I'm representing the third generation IIT on this committee. But you know, all the IITs are growing quite fast in terms of catching up with the other IITs. And each of us has been tasked with driving one of each of these areas. You know, they've identified 5 areas for the iCET, but the Empowered Committee, which is looking at collaborations not only with the US, but across various other countries, we are looking at 12 different areas. So probably I'll talk about it a little bit later on. So we are driving this. So we are looking at various initiatives, and if you look at the faculty composition, you know, I've been, as a third generation IIT, hiring a lot of new faculty members. There's almost 80% of our faculty have international exposure, whether they've done PhD abroad or they have done postdoc position abroad, and out of which almost 60 to 70% would have some US connect, either done PhD there. So I think this is a great opportunity of this connect that we have in collaborating with US and taking this iCET initiatives. Whether it is through joint research programs, we've been talking the last few days about joint degree programs, and then exchange programs. And one of the things that is also we've been discussing is, while our students are coming here, the number of students from US coming to the Indian institutes to spend some time is very limited. Now, how do we create platforms for this so that there's a true collaboration between the two, between the institutions in US and India? These are things that are in discussion that we've been having. And also the strong ecosystem, startup ecosystem that's developing in India. How do we create platforms to leverage this in both the countries? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our last 2 panelists give us some perspective from the US side. So, Mr. Mohan Kumar, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. It is a privilege to be here. I represent the National Science Foundation. In particular, I'm from the Computer Information Science and Engineering Directorate at NSF. I'm also the lead program director for the NSF India collaborations. And over the last couple of years, we created a number of collaborative frameworks with Department of Science and Technology, as well as with the Ministry of Information, Electronics and Information Technology. As well, and we are beginning to create more frameworks with the DBT, the Department of Biotechnology. I wanted to mention a few things, and this is a framework that has been created for research collaboration among researchers in India and the US. And definitely there are pathways for students to be involved in all this. In particular, with the 3 questions, I would like to point out that for long-term sustainable partnerships, it takes time. There are IITs in India who have, many professors and researchers in IITs have well-established collaborations with colleagues from overseas, but not other places in India. So it requires a lot of patience and mentoring of faculty and researchers from other places, as well as junior faculty in IITs. That is one point that we should keep in mind. And the other is for long-term sustainable partnerships, we need to involve students right from the undergrad level to the PhD and postdoc level at all institutions, both in the US and India. And we also have to encourage diverse participation of students from across the country and also coming from different cultural backgrounds, as well as men and women in almost equal representations in all areas of science and engineering. So that will be critical for growth, and that will be critical for long-term and sustainable partnerships between any two nations, for that matter, but both India and US. I'm sure we are moving forward in that direction. The other point I wanted to make is in terms of industry and collaborations. Also, it relates to the question of how alumni can assist. I'm in charge of a program in the NSF called the Industry University Cooperative Research Centers. The IUCRCs, the short form, is a platform for industries, universities to come together along with the government organizations for collaboration in research. So we have something like 80 plus centers in the US, and nearly 200 universities are involved in these centers. And IUCRCs are long-standing, very popular programs at the NSF. They have been there for about 50 plus years. And they are in all the leading edge technological areas. And in these IUCRCs, there is participation of industry as well as universities. There is funding from the NSF, from several government organizations in the US, like DSTO, like the Air Force Research Lab, DRDO, and so on. And there is participation of faculty from students. But very importantly, in these IUCRCs, hundreds and thousands of students are involved. And these students are the drivers of the future. And these students work on these centers in collaboration with university and industry researchers, and they will be joining the industries in the future, and they will be driving the technology in industry once they join the industry. So this is a very successful program. This is another area where alumni from IITs can help with industries in India, and we would like to create a similar program in India where universities and industries can come together and attack research problems as well as train and mentor students.
Mr. Kumar, thank you. Please, Mr. Dawes.
So I'm Senior Vice President at the Association of American Universities, and I'm very pleased to be here, excited about the opportunities. And let me give you a little background first on AAU. AAU represents 69 leading research universities in the United States, 2 in Canada, University of Toronto and McGill. We are an independent nonprofit, but represent the presidents and the chancellors of those universities. So we are not a government entity, but we work very closely with the government and the National Science Foundation, the other agencies. And back just over a year ago, we were asked by our National Security Council, in preparation for the iCET, really kind of the first meeting around iCET that was organized by Jake Sullivan, our National Security Advisor, and Ajit Doval from India, if we would pull together a group of our leaders to think about how to better partner with India. And of course, we have individual institutions that were already doing a lot of work with individual institutions, but collectively, we hadn't really given a lot of thought to how do all of the universities, not just AAU institutions, by the way, we work closely with other organizations, the Land Grant Association and the other higher ed associations. How do we pull all of the universities into this? And so we formed a task force. And that actually, it's interesting because at first we invited a few of our presidents too, but when the other presidents found out what we were doing, we ended up with 5 co-chairs of this task force, 15 members. And we were able to write a report that was released early in June. And that, what I want to talk a little bit about is what that report really said. And we've had some great conversations. The other thing is we have certainly worked with our IIT colleagues who are on the stage and trying to get input to to make sure that we're going in the right direction. Some of the things that came out of the report, and I encourage you, you can read it on our website, which is at www.aau.edu. But number one was how do we create some organization or structure to facilitate partnerships to even just do matchmaking, because so many universities and their faculty don't know individuals doing similar research in India. And how can we do that? So one of the recommendations was to create a joint virtual institute focused on kind of grand challenges that we're facing in the US and India, these global grand challenges. And so that will help organize workshops, do those introductions to get researchers together. That's a starting point. The other things the report really emphasized was how do we promote collaborative research between US researchers and Indian researchers, but also to something that's really important, how do we do that at an institutional level? So it's not just the faculty member that came from India that's now here. How do we really get institutional commitments behind this to support collaborative research? A lot of focus on student and faculty exchanges, particularly how do we get US faculty to go more to India, and particularly students, I think, is an area we want to emphasize. Already it's been brought up about core facilities and equipment. We certainly have a lot of laboratories here that I think it would be useful to have Indian researchers be able to access, and students. Similarly, as India builds its infrastructure, I think there'll be opportunities there. Tech acceleration, tech transfer. We have a long history in the US of doing that. We work very closely with the Association of University Technology Managers. They are very interested in helping to be involved, and they are now an international organization. So I think tech acceleration and how do we get things from the laboratory into the marketplace and for usage is another area. Research opportunities for students, internships, apprenticeships, as we talk about skilling, is another area our report emphasizes. Two last things I'll say and then conclude. Another thing is we have to work, and one interesting thing about AAU is because we're independent and we're not a part of the government, we do advocacy, working on policies like the visa policy and trying to get people in. And then last, I think just working across the agencies that we have, multiple agencies in the US. It's not just the NSF, but NIH, NIST, and others.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think we will now, this has been a good set of comments, initial comments. I'm sure there are a lot of questions. We have actually got a lot of questions from all of you, which I have here. And I'm going to ask some of these questions, and I won't particularly say who, but please step in and let's make it a good, lively discussion. So let me ask Professor Satya to maybe kick off. And the question is, how these areas were picked, and can ICT be expanded into which areas, or this 5 areas that you identified are the initial ones, and that will be what it will be. Professor Satya.
Thank you. So the 5 areas that were referred to, including, and also as the AU side also, they said they're going to identify anchor institutes which will champion this and bring everyone together. So the 5 areas under the iCET that have been identified, including semiconductor technology and manufacturing, and then health equity and pandemic preparedness, sustainable energy and environment, sustainable agriculture and food security, and then critical and emerging technologies, including advanced materials, telecommunications, AI, cybersecurity, and quantum sciences. Now, under this empowered committee that's been created, we actually identified 12 areas in addition to this. Each of the core iCET members have been asked to take the lead in driving each of these areas. For example, in the area of advanced materials, rare earth, and other areas include advanced materials, rare earth, and critical minerals that IIT Hyderabad is taking the lead on, and semiconductors also IIT Hyderabad is taking the lead. Then energy, sustainability, and climate change. And another area is smart cities and mobilities that IIT Delhi is taking the lead on. Then blue economy, our Ministry of Earth Sciences in India is also driving the blue economy. And blue economy, and then industry and manufacturing 4.0, IIT Madras is taking the lead. Healthcare and medtech, and then space and defense research, IISc is taking the lead. Then advanced computing, including supercomputing, AI, quantum computing, IIT Bombay is taking the lead. Then, as Professor Ahuja mentioned earlier, in the area of agriculture and food technologies, Ropar is taking the lead. And then next-gen communications, IIT Kanpur is taking the lead. And then the area of disaster management and resilient infrastructure, IIT Tirupati is taking the lead. So these are the other areas we are looking at in addition to the 5 areas that we would like to work on during our discussions, for example, at AU and at NSF. Resilient infrastructure is something that seem to have a lot of initiatives that are taking place. So we're talking about how to expand in those areas and so on. Thank you. Yeah.
So just a follow-up, I mean, of course you identified these 5 areas and other areas that might come in. Obviously, this is a pretty resource-intensive research. So the question really becomes is, where are the resources going to come from? Are there sufficient initial seed resources, and then more resources have to be raised? So anybody has perspective on, please.
So, as a co-chair of this team, just before coming here, we had a meeting with all the ministries, the secretaries of all the ministries that are falling in these specific areas. And we asked them, are you with us when we are going to US and going to talk to various people? So already Indian side, $50 million has been kept aside as a seed grant to work in these specific areas that Satya just now mentioned. And we are looking forward to support from the US side, as Tobin and our Mohan mentioned, not just NSF, NIH is there, and various other government agencies are there, and also industry are there. So we are looking forward to that, and I'm sure as the days go, we will have more and more support coming from both the sides. What is more important to know for all of you is that India is very keen on these collaborations and say that we are going to put matching grant as long as there is a certain amount of funding coming from the US side. And so we are not going to let you down, is the message that we are getting from our side. Thank you very much.
Professor Chaudhuri, you want to?
Yeah, I think I could add to what Professor Murty said, that one is, of course, something that is earmarked through this iCET initiative, which is definitely is about 50 million to start with, okay, from the Indian side. But if you go back for the, there's been a preparation going on in India to somehow empower all this university system, overall the research ecosystem over the last several years by doing this Institute of Eminence rule, that particular route. And for that, like for example, IIT Bombay itself, I can tell you, like we have spent 500 crores, which is more than $60 million worth of equipment, so that actually we are ready to actually have this launch. Similarly, IISc and IIT Delhi, many other people have been, all these universities have been funded. So I think together, if you look at it, is the pool of support that we are actually building up in India is fairly, I think, quite expansive in say that to take up the challenge.
So also want to add 1 minute.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Abhay talked about NRF. NRF is also going to put a lot of money. A major portion of that is also for international collaborations.
So okay. I want to ask the question of the US counterpart, saying if India, as they have said, they're putting on some resources, how do you think the US is responding in its own way, and what do you think the situation is there?
So I'll start, because I think you've already heard from Dr. Panchanathan about what NSF and is doing, but then there are other commitments. I think we are in the process of talking to as I mentioned, the other agencies. In fact, we had the director of the National Institute of Food and Agriculture with us earlier in the week from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Certainly important to sustainable agriculture and food security. But then we are talking to the NIH, the Department of Defense, these other agencies. I think there's a commitment there. Certainly a commitment, and our universities are already putting a lot of their own funds in to facilitate these, and I think that's shown by the interest. And then also leveraging industrial interest. And at that meeting I mentioned, where iCET was announced, there were many, a lot of industry leaders on the U.S. side who clearly have an interest. So I think there's lots of enthusiasm and lots of opportunity, and I am convinced that we will be able to get plenty of support to push this forward on our side.
Yeah, I would like to add that, rather underscore what I said earlier. We already have established many collaborative programs, collaborative opportunities for Indian researchers and the US researchers to come together and write joint proposals in several areas, in computing, in engineering, in science, and in biotechnology. And this is ongoing. And we mentioned the focus areas a while ago, and there are collaborative proposals in all these areas.
Obviously, resources are critical, but there are a lot more things needed than just mere financial resources or even technical laboratory resources, et cetera. How do you think we should look at this program? It's now starting. How do we look at the success and the impact of this program? How would you measure it? I know it takes a long time for research collaborations to fructify, but what is in your mind as you think about this as to what are the milestones, what will be the criteria of success, what is the impact you are expecting? Please.
Yeah. So I would like to say that industry the multinationals going to play a very important role. So what we have talked, 50 million USD from Indian side, this is just a seed money. So to successful running of this program, we need more funding, and especially the industry from both sides has to put another thing is sustainable collaborations. So we should not have a collaboration which will die in 1 or 2 years. So we need this collaboration, should exist for at least a decade from now. And the best way to keep that collaboration is like a joint supervision or a double degree program. So both sides can be benefit, and we have a long sustainable relations when these PhD students or masters are coming from both institutions, and they can be as a bridge between two countries, and this program can be successful.
Anybody else on this?
Maybe I can add to what Professor Ahuja said, that normally I would put it in 2 baskets in terms of how the measures to be done. One is like in an academic scenario, we always look at output level, and the next one is a little bit more difficult to quantify, is the outcome. Okay. So if you look at the output level, so there are metrics which are quite standardized, because we are talking about academia, like publications, patents, other things that we do. But when you go for the outcome, because if you remember, I said to start with what impact does it make finally? And that impact would be seen that in terms of the translatability of some of this developed IP that comes in terms of being with the industry or setting up co-incubation with the US partners, and to see that actually finally the benefit reaches to the masses. So that's what I think it's a little harder to quantify at this point, but even if you are like few, it happens, I think it's worth the deal.
Professor Govindan.
Yeah, I think he already made the points I wanted to make, but just wanted to add one more thing, that one can really quantify these because we have all the data now. How many joint publications between Indian and US researchers, and then you see after the end of, say, few years, is there a jump in that metric? Is there a jump in the number of co-innovation labs that are set up? Is there a jump in the number of joint patents that are written? So I think these are well quantifiable measures, and I think the baseline should be what exists now, which is already known, and then what is the jump which comes in terms of quantifiable metrics.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that something we have both in the US and in India, it can be an opportunity, is at scale. We have competent students at scale in both countries. And I think one of the measures of the outcome of this is how many students graduate with bachelor's, with master's, and with PhD, and also end up in key positions in industry and universities after participation in these initiatives. So that will be a key factor, because we were looking at long-term sustainable partnerships, and the students of today are the drivers of the future. and how much we invest in students, in training them, in mentoring them, and how they succeed it will be critical to this long-term and sustainable partnerships.
And these students, we would like to see more and more jointly supervised students. That's a true collaboration. We would like to see more and more PhD, master's level students who are jointly supervised. That could be one of the measures of the success.
Professor Satya.
Yeah. So one of the other things that is being discussed is the IP issues that come out through these joint collaborations. So how many patents are filed jointly and together? I think that's going to be one more measure of success.
Very briefly, how we develop relationships between our faculty and faculty in India, and that means getting our students over there. So measuring students and faculty exchanges, how many are actually happening? And I think that's going to be one of the key things, because that's what's going to lead to the joint publications, the joint IP, is if we build real relationships. And that's kind of what's happened already, as many of the faculty on our universities who came from India have relationships, and then you start building that network and flow of not the people, but then the knowledge back and forth across our two countries. So that will be a measure that we'll be watching.
I have a follow-on question on this area, which is, as I looked at those areas that you identified, some are quite fundamental research, whether it's quantum and so on, and some are more application-oriented, whether it's food security issues and so on. And they're quite different approaches to when you're doing some fundamental research versus some much more application, very relevant, but much more application. You guys have any perspective on what should be the right mix? Do we have the right mix? What are the time frames of success on these types of things?
I think the time scales is what would definitely be one distinguishing factor. For basic research, especially in IISc, we do a lot of the basic research. So there, I think the time scales one has to measure the success, one needs to give to measure the success much longer. And I think the resources also are different. For applied areas, you want to look at more at patents and innovation. Whereas for basic, you are more looking at joint papers, what sort of impact it has, how well the work is cited. So I think, but all of us do both. So I don't see any problem in mixing both the areas. It's just, as you rightly said, the approaches would be different, how you evaluate them would be different.
Yes.
And so, as you mentioned, the basic science, and I will say that the basic science is the mother of innovation. So if we want to be innovative, our basics should be strong. So they are directly linked, actually. So basic science and innovation will go along. So this is the lesson we can learn, that basic science is equally important when we talk about innovation. And thank you.
Anything else?
I think, I agree with both, but, what happens is that in life, we have two things, when you go along life is not always a straight path. So during the process, you pick up a lot of low-hanging fruits, and some of them in the research could be what is translatable today, what we can go into 5 years and others, because technology is moving too fast. We cannot probably go beyond that. But what is going to come in the long run is something that we should be driving it at, because both sides have tremendous kind of investment in terms of also fundamental research, which probably will see us getting new things, new ideas, and things probably we have no idea what's going on in another 15, 20 years, and then that would be a real success.
The screen says time is up, but I'm going to take a few more minutes because we started a few minutes late. I hope you understand. So, one fundamental trend in the world is that India will probably be the largest source of technical talent in the world. US continues to be able to attract the best talent from all over the world and will also have an extraordinary supply of technical talent. So this kind of collaboration between the two largest reservoirs of technical talent, scientific talent, will be probably a model and can really make a difference in the path of solving many of the problems we have talked about, whether it be climate change, food security, or whatever else. So anybody has any thoughts on how we nurture this talent properly and make this collaboration work? That would be my question, please.
So I think it's very true that traditionally India has been supplying talent, but I think now the time has come that India also needs to retain talent. So the way it can be made into a win-win situation is what many people here have talked about, having things done jointly, so that both sides benefit, rather than just talent coming here and staying here. It'll be good to have things done jointly where people can spend part of the time here and part of the time in India. And then in that case, many will probably, stay back in India after that, but they get the international experience also in the US.
May I give a divergent view to what you said?
Yes.
Okay. You said something that US is attracting basin for the talents, and this will continue. I want you to go back to maybe about 100 years, because you started with this thing with J.C. Bose kind of thing. If you look at that, this used to be, the UK used to be the basin of attractor for the Indian talent pool about 100 years ago. And it dwindled. Nothing happened because it had a kind of a exponential down, and now it moved to US. Now it's a responsibility of the US side to keep it on, because if it doesn't happen, you don't know where it moves, okay? So we should not be very complacent that the trend is going to happen, because if a lot of things happen in India, then you have to have a special kind of mechanism to see that the talent pool, you keep getting it. Otherwise, you're going to lose, just like the way the Indian population no longer, the talent pool, I would say, very rarely go to UK.
Yeah.
And most of the areas that we have identified under this iCET are all grand challenge for both the countries, and not only for both the countries, for the whole globe. So it's essential that we collaborate and work. And India also, there are great aspirations. The amount of funding India is putting in each of these areas, you take quantum, you take semiconductors, you take any of these, there's a lot of funding being put so that you generate the talent pool, which is essential for the whole globe.
Last comment, and then I'm going to ask Subhasis to summarize the discussion.
So speaking from the US perspective, we recognize the value of international talent. If you look at founders of startup companies in the US, more were founded by immigrants than US-born citizens, and India leads that. So we recognize the value of Indian talent already to our economy. The issue is, how do we make that, again, a two-way street? So you're benefiting from our talent, and that's what we're going to really work on at AAU, and that's what our commitment is.
Subhasis, it's been a wonderful discussion, but it's up to you now. A great challenge to see if you can summarize this.
Yeah, I think we had a great discussion, because this is the first time we are exposing iCET to the general population here, And what we discussed is that, yes, there has been a need that is coming up from both sides, and thanks to the patronage of the higher authorities at both sides, we are at a position where actually we see that this is going to happen. And the key thing that we should be looking at, I think that came out as a part of the discussion, is that make it institutional rather than we have as an individual wise, which we have always had. Second thing is that we need to create a long-term relationship. I think many of them, you do it one-off kind of thing, rather than it has to be like something substantive basis. It should continue over longer, maybe 25 years, 50 years, because this is the beginning. So that's what we need to focus. So that's what is the sustainable model. You raise the issue of when you do something, okay, what you expect out of it. So there has to be certain kind of measurable things, because many times we are very good in terms of setting it up and we don't kill them, okay, if they become a dead meat. So there has to be a process also at some point. So evaluation is very critical that we have to do. Then, also we, I think, had in a form of discussion that certain, the problem domains need not be always the same, what you have in US and what you have in India, like farming. I think it's we have a small set of farmland to what you have in US. So the solutions have to be different. And of course, I think I would say that one thing which we have not discussed enough, but it was just raised as a passing comment, is at the end of it, we need to have some co-incubation, some kind of a entrepreneurial ecosystem. And since I think the august audience that you have here, I think they could actually somehow help the entire system because they know both sides. And if that's what would be, I would say, the greatest impact that I think we can see that when this is a successful model of research. So thank you. I'll not take any more.
No, I think the last point you made is a good challenge to all of us, which is the thought of how can we contribute in this really noble effort, because it has great expectation and we are looking forward to it. One of the things that we are here collectively good at is commercializing and bringing to the benefits of the innovation to the world. So you can count on us on that and count on us on anything else we can help you with. Thank you so much.
Thank you, friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.